guy talking. All right, thank you for your patience. We're really excited that you joined the best breakout room at this hour. We have some updates that we want to talk to you about the NSF biographical sketch. And we've been working hard on the system the past few months, and now we want to kind of show you all the great things that we've been doing. All right, so we're going to cover a lot of ground today. I specifically geared this to be kind of a practical session and kind of show you solutions for using it and how you can exploit the features. So we're going to talk about how to get into SciENcv, and there's multiple ways. The advantages of that when you're working with the forms. At the last meeting, these were not launched yet, and we just launched a new interface for the NSF biographical sketch back in August. So we're going to take a look at that, how an ORCID account can help you fill out this information, and also add citations to these biographical sketch. Document certification is also a main feature of some of our updates. We're going to look at how that happens and how a delegate helps with this whole process. So those are kind of the things that we're going to be walking through today. Send questions in at any time. I have Carol and Sherry are kind of like manning the chat, and they're sort of looking at it, and they're going to triage that and get them up to us. So SciENcv, it came originally as a request from this very forum here, from the FDP, asking how can we help reduce burden when all the scientific funding agencies are asking for basically the same type of information, but slightly different, right? And NSF had one form, and NIH had one form, and everyone was using different forms, essentially asking the same thing. So SciENcv was developed to kind of address that. And the main purpose is to reduce burden. And one way that we can help reduce burden is investigators might have data that's already out there in different systems. And so we looked at how we could help investigators leverage this information, pull them in, populate the forms, add citations or products to forms. And from the agency side, it also helps the agencies because we're interested in seeing how we support investigators and how they go on and do exciting things. So it's kind of a win-win for both the agency side and for the applicant side. SciENcv is a tool that helps with a particular portion of a grant application. Grant applications have many parts to them and many documents, and SciENcv helps individuals fill out biographical sketches and financial support forms, specifically current and pending other support forms. The elevator pitch that I give to my parents is, well, what is SciENcv? And I tell them, well, when you do your taxes come April, it's kind of like a tax prep software. So sort of like TurboTax or H&R Block or Free Tax USA. The government wants information in the form of a PDF about your income. And there are solutions out there that you can go in and one of these applications kind of leads you through the process and creates the PDF for you. And there are additional tools, like maybe it can pull in information from a W-4, maybe it can pull information from a previous year's return. So SciENcv is kind of similar in that way. It's a web interface. It helps you fill out these forms. You can have multiple copies. You can pull information from previous forms to make an updated version. You can go out to different information systems and pull in information there. And the end goal is you have a nicely, perfectly formatted document that will go right into your grant application. It works with the agency guidelines. So NSF and NIH, they have these real big, think of that like the tax code, right? You can go look at the tax code for the specific information, but the tool is there to adhere to what those policies are and to produce a document that is compliant with those policies. So you don't have to worry that, am I using the right font and the right size? SciENcv kind of takes care of those administrative pieces for you. So as I mentioned, you can have as many versions of biosketches and current and pending other support forms that you wish. Some investigators will have different types of grant applications. They might have a clinical application and they want to highlight their skills there. And then maybe there's a different grant application they'd like to apply for that's more basic science and they want to highlight a different aspect of their research. So you can have as many versions as you want in your account. At any time, you can output a PDF. You click a button, we generate the PDF for you. You can review it. If you want to go back and make some changes, go back in, change, hit the button again, we make a new PDF. And finally, and at the end of this presentation, we're going to see how a delegate can help manage this information, filling this out and getting it prepared for the PI so that it limits the amount of time that the PI has to spend in the system. All right, so let's talk about accessing SciENcv. And I added a QR code. So if you're kind of sitting there and you don't want to type out the URL, you can use the QR code and kind of do this as I'm talking through it. Let's look, here's an option. You can use your research.gov credentials to sign in to SciENcv. You would click on that button. It takes you right over to research.gov. This is the username and password. You are actually authenticating in that system. And once you authenticate, you're transported back over to SciENcv, and that connection is made and you're able to start filling out the forms. And one nice feature is SciENcv is an application that's in a suite of tools. It's all part of my NCBI. This is the free account system that we have at NCBI. SciENcv is one of those tools. And the analogy I use is you can think of this toolbox as a house, and you can add multiple doors to access that account. So if you have your NSF login, you can research.gov, you can use that to access. But if you also have grants with NIH, you might have an ERA Commons account. You can link your ERA Commons account as well and use either one to access the system. And then later on, I'm going to talk about ORCID and how ORCID can help you filling out these forms and add additional information. You can add ORCID as a possibility too. And so later on, we're going to look like, how do I add these extra login accounts to access my data? So we'll take a look at that in a second. But first, let's look at what it's like to go in and actually fill out these forms and what are some of the features that SciENcv brings to the table to make this nice and easy for you. So the big news, we had talked about in the past that this was coming. We had an interface update for the NSF biographical sketch. In January, when the 23-1 forms came out for NSF, we had a new interface launch for the current and pending other support. It was nice and clean and adds a lot of usability enhancements to making this easy to fill out. In this past August, we launched the new analogous interface for the NSF biographical sketch. So anyone that had filled out a 23-1 biographical sketch in June, when they came and accessed their account in the past week or so, they got the new interface automatically. All the data is the same. It's just a new interface that's laid out on top of that information. I'd like to point out that with the new 23-1 forms came some additional information that needed to be added. Specifically, different areas of the form are now requesting that the country information be filled out. So if an individual had a biographical sketch that was filled out, say, from a year ago, and they come to fill out the new forms, they might see if they copy information from the old form over into the new form, that they have some warnings that appear. And that is because in this case, the old form was not asking for country and state, and now the new form requires that. So you can easily see when you open the bio sketch, you'll see there's warnings that appear, and then when you go in to edit the information, the required fields are highlighted. This is the fields that are missing that you need to have filled out. We spent a lot of time looking at how users PIs fill out information using SciENcv. We had a request that we sent out asking people to come and do usability tests. We had a lot of faculty that reached out to us. We really appreciate them volunteering their time for us to kind of try out and observe and see, like, what are the workflows that are comfortable to them? What are things that help them fill this out quicker? And how can we improve the system? So this new interface has a lot of different features. For example, if you're filling out a field that requires a date, we have a date picker. Helps, you can type it in straight ahead, or you can use this little calendar icon. You get the date picker and it formats it exactly the way the system wants. I showed you, if you miss some information that's required, we highlight the text box and let you know, hey, this field's required. You have to have a value here. Some other parts of the form, and this one here is statement of potential overlap as part of the current and pending other support form. This particular field, you have a certain number of characters that you can enter, and we have a character counter to let you know how much you've entered and how much space you have left. So again, we thank all the PIs that donated their time and worked with us and allowed us to kind of look and get their feedback on what would be helpful for them, because that kind of information is what we put into this tool to make it better for them. There's some other ones, other new features I'm going to show you in a little bit that also we've added as well. All right, so let's look at ORCID now. We talked about ORCID and how that can be an assistance when you're using SciENcv to fill out these forms. As I mentioned, when we were looking at how to sign into SciENcv, ORCID can be used as an authentication route. If you already have an NSF account linked to SciENcv, you can add ORCID as an additional way to get in. Very handy. It also gives you, if you set up an ORCID account, you will get a persistent identifier. That is currently an optional field that you can add to these forms. I'm going to show you where that is added and how that works. But a lot of people are using persistent identifiers now in their publication process. When they go to set manuscripts off for peer review, if you add your persistent identifier, it helps with that process as well. ORCID, if you've set up the ORCID account, it is a profile that is separate from SciENcv, and it has a lot of information that is useful for filling out a biographical sketch. It'll have your education or professional preparation, citations that are pulled into the system. So this information is very useful when filling out biographical sketches. And if you link an ORCID account to SciENcv, you can exploit that and pull it into the forms. Again, the citation feature is really awesome. I use it myself quite a bit, because once you start getting in the habit of using your ORCID ID to send to publishers, ORCID is excellent at kind of looking for that ID. And when it sees manuscripts that become published in a big number of citation databases, it automatically pulls that information into your ORCID record. And once it's in your ORCID profile, you can use it and add it to documents in SciENcv. Okay, so let's kind of take a use case where you've already been using SciENcv. Maybe I've just sold you on using ORCID to assist you with this. So how do you add ORCID? And this can work for other logins as well, but we'll use ORCID as the example. So I've signed in. I can see in the upper right, my username is there. If I click on that icon, I get a menu and I go to account settings. And within account settings, there is a section called linked accounts. This shows you all the doors that you've added to access your SciENcv account. So if you click change, you will then be able to search for many different, there's over 4,000 options to authenticate and link into SciENcv. So if you search for ORCID, you'll find ORCID there as an option. You click on that, it will send you to ORCID and you sign in, you authenticate in the ORCID system. Once you successfully authenticate with ORCID, it redirects you back to SciENcv. Now you've linked your ORCID account to SciENcv. So it's pretty straightforward. And once you've made that linkage, it kind of unlocks a lot of other features that come with having an ORCID account. First one being is you have your ORCID persistent identifier. We now will add your ORCID ID automatically if you've linked your ORCID account to SciENcv and you go out to fill out a form. We automatically add your ORCID identifier to these forms. You have the option to take it out if you want to. And again, these are optional. You don't have to have a persistent identifier, but if you do link your ORCID account, we'll go ahead and add it to that form on your behalf. The profile information that is stored within your ORCID account is very valuable for filling out the biographical sketch. So once you've linked your ORCID account, when you come into SciENcv and you're ready to make a new bio sketch, this example here, I have this grant application and I want it to be in the NSF format, and I can choose a data source at this point. You can start with a blank, just give me a blank form to start filling out. But to use my ORCID profile, I choose external source and I choose ORCID. And at that point, when you say create the document, SciENcv will go to your linked ORCID account. It will make a call to the API over there, and it will pull in the information from your ORCID profile and put it into a new document for you. Once that comes in to your document in SciENcv, the data is then static at that point. So you can, it has pre-populated many of the fields for you, but you have ultimate control. You can go in, you can edit anything, you can remove things, you can add other things. It's just this pulling of profile information is a one-time step that just pre-populates it, and then you have control over if everything looks good, that's fine, but if you want to edit anything, you're free to do so. Any edits that you make will not overwrite your information in ORCID. This is just a one-time pull, and then it's static, and you can use it however you wish. In the biographical sketches that you produce using SciENcv, one of the major sections is adding products. And I'm showing the interface now from the NSF biographical sketch, and they have two sections for adding products to the biographical sketch, products that are most closely related and other significant products. One thing I'll point out is when you have products that are added to these sections, you have control over what order they display in, and it's simply a drag and drop. It might not be apparent, so that's why I'm mentioning it now, but in the interface, if you actually click, and you can drag to reorder the way that the products appear. When you want to add additional products, you click on Edit Products, and that will bring you to this interface. In this example, I have an ORCID account linked, and you'll see there's two different tabs. One is for my bibliography, and the other is for ORCID. My bibliography is a collection that comes by default with, there's the ORCID tab, comes by default with SciENcv. You're able to add citations into there. There's a link here, add a product, under the My Bibliography tab. What this tool does is lets you search in PubMed. That's our life sciences database that a lot of NIH-funded researchers will have works that are there. They can search for their items in PubMed and add it if it doesn't already exist in their bibliography. But My Bibliography has additional features that are helpful for anyone. If you navigate back to My Bibliography, and at the very top of the biographical sketch form in SciENcv, there's a little breadcrumb. If you navigate back to the top level, My NCBI, you can access the bibliography tool. And within the bibliography tool itself, there are additional options for adding products. You can search PubMed like you can from within SciENcv. You can create manual citations, and we have formats for many different types of citations, for journal articles, for books, for meetings, for databases, interim products. So a preprint might fall under that kind of category. This information can get added within this bibliography database. And then once you've saved it there, it's available for you to add to any biosketch that you want in your SciENcv account. So these are features that anyone can use. You get the My Bibliography tool as part of your MyNCBI account, and it works with SciENcv. Oh, the final thing to mention as well that My Bibliography supports is that you can upload citation manager files. So if you're already using EndNote, and you've already got this giant bibliography that's built up in that application, you can export it as an NBib file, and My Bibliography will import that and then add those citations into your bibliography account. So that's also a very handy feature. My Bibliography might not be as heavily used by NSF researchers, but for NIH-funded investigators, My Bibliography is a big tool for them, and it's something that those investigators will be familiar with because they use My Bibliography to complete their progress report. So they have annual progress reports for their NIH grants, and the only way they can link citations into that report is by using My Bibliography. So NIH investigators are pretty familiar with this tool. They've already probably are as part of their workflow for grant reporting, and SciENcv will work with that when they want to fill out biographical sketches. But if you're not typically publishing in a journal that will be indexed by PubMed, if it's not life science, maybe it's physical science or social sciences, that's where ORCID is really a nice solution for those types of investigators, because ORCID works with many different citation databases in addition to PubMed. So it can go out, it can pull in works from all these different citations. You're able to link it into your account. It will also automatically scan these citation databases for your ORCID ID. So if you publish with a publisher and the publisher sends off that citation with your ORCID ID attached to one of these databases, ORCID will automatically pull it into your profile. So really a nice tool. They have a lot more ability to scan a much broader list of citation databases than we are here at SciENcv, because we're just linked to PubMed. So that's where ORCID is really powerful for that type of investigator. We also, by getting feedback a few years ago from FDP faculty, have added in an additional feature for ORCID citations that come into SciENcv, and this is dealing with large author lists. You encounter it quite a lot with physical type journals, et cetera, where there might be hundreds of authors on a particular publication. And that might, picking one or two of these citations with giant author lists would automatically throw you over the page limit for the NSF biographical sketch. So in SciENcv, for these types of citations, we do offer a tool where you can go in and edit the author list, and you can make sure it conforms to the citation format and requirements. So you might say, have the first 2 or 3 authors followed by an et al, and save that. And now you have a nice compact version that will show up on the biographical sketch form that you fill out. When you create the biographical sketch from SciENcv, we generate the PDF for you. We do retain all of this information. It just won't appear on the PDF page itself, but we encapsulate this in structured data and we attach it to the PDF. So it's a win for the investigators because they're not hampered by having this huge list of authors that takes up a lot of the real estate on the PDF. but the agency still gets all this information because it's transferred as structured data that's attached to the PDF. All right, let's take a look now at certifying these documents. So once you have everything filled out, how do I get this certified? I've heard about this certification piece that federal government is starting to ask be applied to these documents. And we've developed a solution for this in SciENcv. We think it's pretty straightforward. When the PI is working in SciENcv and they're ready to create the PDF version of their biographical sketch or the current and pending support, they'll click on the download PDF button, and then they are presented with a dialogue, certification dialogue saying, I affirm that everything is correct, etc. When they agree to that, we will generate the PDF. We will include the language on the PDF. We also put information that it was certified by the PI, what their name is, and the time at which they certified the document. If once they generate this, they're like, oh wait, I want to change something, they can go back at any time, update the data within SciENcv, and then click download PDF again, and we'll generate a new one, and they'll go through this process of seeing the certification form, agreeing with it, and then we'll create the PDF. So how do delegates work with this? So the certification process requires that the PI certifies the document. Now, what happens when there's a delegate that is helping to manage this information? How does that work? So first of all, let's look at how you even ask a delegate to help with this information. So much like when you're adding an additional login route, once you're in the SciENcv system, you'll see your username in the upper right. You click on that, you choose account settings, and there's linked accounts. That's where we added additional login routes, such as ORCID. And just below that is a section for delegates. And this is where you will invite a delegate to come and manage the system for you. We simply ask for a contact email address. Once you fill that out, the system will send an email invite to that person that you have designated. They will follow that invitation back to SciENcv. They will sign in however they want. It might be through research.gov, it might be through ORCID, but once they authenticate into the system using that invitation, they are linked to the PI as a delegate for them. And the delegate at that point, they will see, once they go into MyNCBI, they're looking at SciENcv, and they'll see down below delegated CVs, and they'll see the PI that they are now able to manage. And might be a question you have right now. Yes, they can manage more than one PI. We've seen cases where there might be an assistant of some sort working in a department, and they might have 5 or 6 PIs, and they're helping to manage information for each of them. So there would be a line for each of the PIs that have asked them to be their delegate, and they've accepted it. So when they're ready to go in and help manage that information for the PI, they click on the PI's name. They will then see the PI's account. There's a banner at the top. We try to make it as explicit as we possibly can, saying you are in the PI's account now as a delegate, because of course the delegate, they'll have their own account. They can make a biosketch if they want. But we try to make it very obvious that they're working as a delegate for someone else at this point. And when they're filling out the documents, there's also a banner at the top of there. You're working in a delegated account. They can return to their own account once they're done. But you'll notice in the upper right, the download PDF is grayed out because they're not allowed to certify the document on the PI's behalf. That's an action that the PI has to take themselves. And from feedback we've gotten from the faculty using it over the past several months, we've added a new feature, and that is to view a draft of what they're working on. So we had feedback from people saying, hey, Before I send it to the PI, I just want to make sure with my own eyes that the PDF looks correct. And I don't want to give my PI something. I want to review exactly what the PDF is going to look like. So now you will notice there is a view draft link. You can click it to generate a PDF at any point in the process. So you might not have the form all the way filled out. You've only filled out the first couple of sections. Click on view draft, will generate a PDF of what you have so far. And it looks markedly different. The PDF that is exported, it has draft watermark on it, so you're not going to mistake it for the final version. And if you did by accident try to submit this into research.gov, research.gov also recognizes, oh wait, this is a draft version. It's not the final certified version from the PI, and it will throw up a warning for me, and it won't let you submit this in through the system. All right, so let's say delegates been working on it. They've been generating draft versions. They're very happy with it. They're ready to send it over for the PI. What happens next? So there's the view draft button. They then will tell the PI, hey, I've got the biosketch at a point. I think everything's done. Please go in and review it and generate the final version if you wish. And then the PI will step into their account, authenticate. The PI authenticates into SciENcv. They go in, they can view, they can make any changes they want in SciENcv. And then when they click download PDF, they get the certification piece, which they certify as their role as the PI. And then that's added in. And the final document is produced for them. At that point, the PI has the final version certified. They can submit it. The delegate could go in at that point from the delegate account and also download a copy without any changes having been made if they needed to, and submit it themselves as well. If the PI at any point makes changes and doesn't certify it, then it will revert it back to this. We're waiting for the PI to certify this. So that's the final step for this to be certified and exported and ready for submission to the grant application systems. All right, how can you be involved? I hope that I stressed that a lot of these changes were from direct input that we've had from the community that were actually using SciENcv, giving us feedback, telling us what worked well, what didn't work well. We take all this feedback very seriously, and this is what helps us make the product better and better for each version that we put out. At the very top here, we have a webinar scheduled for October the 19th. So if you're interested in kind of getting some last minute hands-on info, the sign up is still open. If you have someone that you think might be helped by this type of webinar, have them go register for it. You can also keep your eye on, we do these outreach events on a regular basis, and I have a URL here with the QR code. This is where we kind of announce all the things that come up. We have many more types of education information that we put out besides SciENcv for many of the other items that we have at NCBI. We do have some workbooks with hands-on modules from a previous workshop that we had in February of this year, and those are archived. You can go, you can access them, you can try them out yourself. So there are materials that you can use now. And again, it's very important that we have individuals that reach out to us, tell us that things that are working and not working. And I show the help link where they can access the help desk. Particularly important is if you find some type of error in the system where you're not able to complete the form as you expect. It's fine to like check on a form. Hey, is anyone else seeing this? But we really want to have everyone that experiences any kind of issue to write in directly to the help desk, because we have a very formal process. We capture all this information It gives us something for our development team to investigate to see what's going on. And then once we resolve it, we're able to reach back out to everyone that reported this and say, hey, we fixed it. A patch has just been released, and the issue should be resolved for you. Please go and verify this for us. We had a recent example of this that you might be aware of, where for a certain number, not widespread, but a certain number of ORCID users were having difficulty linking products to their biographical sketch. And so those people wrote into us. Our investigators were able to investigate what the problem was. Not to go into too many details, but our system was expecting to see data in a particular field that wasn't there, and it threw an error. And so our team was able to look at this, come up with a fix. The patch was just released yesterday. That all got fixed, and then we reached out to all the individuals that were impacted by this, that reported it to us, to let them know that, hey, everything's been resolved. You should be able to go in and finish your biosketch or whatever document you were trying to generate. So really, we appreciate people that reach out, and we take all this feedback very seriously. And finally, I have at the end some helpful resources. We have YouTube videos that you can share that show people how to fill this out. Hopefully it's not that difficult. They're able to go in and figure out on their own, but there are additional pieces of information that might help them along the way, including this documentation in this SciENcv help manual. And this shows every little nook and cranny of how to do certain functions and how it all works together. So you can also refer your investigators to that information if they need it. And once again, we have our help desk. They're always getting feedback, bug reports, and we triage those and feed them over to our development team as soon as we can. All right, so that is the end of my presentation. I guess at this point, I'll stop sharing. I'll put my camera back on.
Great, thank you, Bart. Thanks so much. There is a ton of questions, and I don't know, and Carol and Sherry have been asking answering some questions in the chat, but starting at the very beginning, the biggest question is, will there be an API to SciENcv for institutions to use? And in absence of one, will there be a delay in the October 23rd date for implementation for NSF?
Okay, so I think those are two separate questions.
Yeah, two very different questions.
Yeah.
One sounded very Gene. Let me answer
Right.
the API question. So the API is on our roadmap. We have been talking with different institutions. We recognize that this can be a big time saver for people, particularly when filling out current and pending other support. You might have a sponsored research office that has a lot of this information, and they want to know, how can we help get this info into SciENcv? So yes, we have this on our roadmap. We don't have it ready by October, but we are looking at it, and we want to come up with a solution. And I think I've shown you other examples where we hear, hey, we want to have a preview, and then boop, we give you the preview PDF. Oh, we have author lists. We need to make that better. So we hear this, and we do try to make these improvements. So we've heard it. It's on our roadmap. Send me a message. It helps us to see how widespread this is. Like, really, there's a whole lot of these institutions that kind of are looking for something like this. It's helpful for us to gauge, like, there's a lot of interest in this. So don't hesitate to reach out. And then we might call on you once we start getting to a beta solution, like, hey, we think we have something, give this a try.
Thank you. And Jean, do you want to take the second part of the question, is the implementation date?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So when we put out the PAP guide for 2023 for public comment in actually spring of 2022, we received a lot of feedback from the community and actually even internally at NSF that the community may not be ready in January of 2023, which is and was January 30, was the effective date of the PAP guide. And that's when this was due to go into effect. But we did listen to the community and we said, okay, we hear you, both NSF staff and the community, that additional time may be needed. And so we have actually already given 9 months, 10 months of additional time to get folks ready for this. And so at this point, it is not our intention to extend that date any further. It's already been pushed out beyond the January date to October 23rd, 2023. Right. So that would be the answer for right now. Right now, that was the extension. We did listen, but it does not appear that we really do need to get these, because we're talking statutory obligations out of CHIPS and Science for the Malign Foreign Talent Recruitment Program certification. So that's for next year, but we've got to get people used to using these and getting the actual NDAA certification in and certified by senior keepers. So that's a long answer to it does not look likely that we will go beyond October 23rd.
Great, thank you. So there's a related question to that from earlier, basically talking about how earlier this year, this person had an experience with a biosketch generated on SciENcv that couldn't pass the quality checks. So they had to upload the fillable PDF. So right. if it comes down to a crunch with a deadline, so what are folks' options there?
Well, we will be working very closely with SciENcv on seeing, and in fact, we're having discussions right now to talk through exactly those issues. What if it's a day that something is, the SciENcv or the system is having issues? What if it's 2 weeks? So we are actively working and in discussions with SciENcv now to address those what ifs beyond October 23rd. Bart, do you want to throw anything else in there?
just to add to that, number one is you gotta let us know ASAP. Don't sit there and fret and time's going by. We have had examples where someone said, hey, I'm trying to use this and it's not working. And it's something simple like there's corrupted data within that person's account and it's resolved within 30 minutes and things are fixed. If it's more widespread, we'll start hearing about more of these, and then we can talk about, hey, wait, we have a certain feature that doesn't seem to be working right for a class of people. And then, then we're working with Jean, we're letting her team know, hey, we think we have something here that we need to address. But communication is the most important.
Is key. ASAP communication on this kind of issues is key.
Thank you. I know there have been other comments about being disappointed about lack of an API. And one of the things that I would mention, and I know that Shauna Sadler from ORCID is also in this session, and I don't want to put her on the spot, but one other option I think universities need to explore, since very many of us are members of ORCID, is writing records directly to ORCID to take care of this. One of the things that we have access to from our institutions is a pretty complete record of funding. So grants from all kinds of sources, not just federal, that might need to be included in current and pending support, for instance. So that's another thing that we as a community, in my opinion, need to consider. And Shauna, you can speak up if you want to, but if you don't, that's fine too.
I'm always game, Lori, no problem. Yeah, absolutely. As Lori mentioned, most of your organizations are already members of ORCID, and we work really closely with Bart and his team. They're great to map the data. So in a perfect world, all of you would be writing employment funding data, and we can also accept the educational and the in-kind, we call it research resources, but that's just labels, the data maps. So it's great. It's not easy, but we are working, with some of your ERA vendors. InfoEd is now connected with ORCID, so you can push the data via InfoEd. And if there's other platforms that you would like ORCID to integrate with, just introduce me. We're really excited to work with all the different vendors. So I don't know, is there anything else I should mention, Lori?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that this might be a question that you might have input to, but also Bart and Sherry and Carol. A question about like multiple data sources of data for a single form. So, funding data from an institutional API or from ORCID and publication data from ORCID plus the API, like, is that a future possibility where like the creation of a biosketch plus current and pending other support form is taking in multiple sources?
So for the biographical sketch, it currently does that. I mean, we had to make a decision at one point. Once you pull the information in, like, did it make sense? How different is your educational experience going to be in one system versus the other? So just to keep things simple, that section of the form, it's just pulled from a single source that you choose. But then when you go to other parts of the form, when I was showing the products, right? You can pull from multiple sources there. You can pull things out of the bibliography. You can pull things out of ORCID. So we did have to make some choices at different points in the form, and we tried to make it as straightforward and simple and not confusing.
Thank you. There was a question earlier that was sent to me directly about delegates. So both SciENcv and ORCID allow delegates to manage records. But the problem this person was having is that the last time they were in it, they were told as a delegate that the linkage can't be done for anyone other than themselves between ORCID and SciENcv. Is that still true, or do you need more info to answer that question?
We need more info. So I mentioned specifically that a delegate can manage many different PIs, and also a PI can have several different delegates that can all work on it. So it should work both ways there. I'm not quite sure what if the person meant like a delegate can't choose other delegates for the PI. The PI controls the account, and they can add delegates and withdraw delegation at any point. So if it's something beyond that,
my read of it was that they couldn't, as a delegate for a researcher, could not link the person's ORCID record. And if that is incorrect, the person can message me or unmute.
okay. So there's an important point right there is the PI would need to authenticate within the ORCID system themselves to link it to that, to the PI's account. It'd be a one-time operation. Once they did it, then it's linked.
Okay.
And then when the delegate is in there working, they have all that information that they can use.
Okay. So to be clear, they need to create the linkage, and then the delegate can do whatever they like. Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Once the PI links and authenticates, they should be keeping that private, hopefully, the username, password. But once the PI's linked it, then that information is available for the delegate.
Yeah, and just quickly, within ORCID, the researcher can assign a proxy to help them manage the data in their ORCID record. We call that a trusted individual, but it's really similar to the same process in SciENcv.
Thanks, Shauna. Thanks, Bart. I know one of the questions that I've seen through various listservs as people are getting ready to support researchers for this is some misunderstanding about ORCID's visibility settings. So, as someone with an ORCID record, you can go in and set like your employment information, your publication line by line to either everyone can see this, only trusted parties can see this, or I'm the only one who can see this. So how do those visibility settings operate with SciENcv?
SciENcv is able to pull information that is marked either public or trusted. And anything that's listed as private is not going to be visible to SciENcv.
Thank you. I'm just looking through the chat to see what we have not already addressed by Carol or Sherry, or that we have talked about.
Lori, I see one.
Sure.
Bart, I apologize, I may have jumped the gun here. The ORCID connection to the current and pending support form isn't live yet, is it?
No, we're not pulling grants yet. No.
So in the current and pending and other support form, the goal is hopefully relatively soon. And then,
Yes.
we've been working together. So apologies, I jumped the gun on that one, but I'm just so excited for it to happen because I think it'll be so useful for the researchers.
Yep, we
And
agree.
there'll be, do I have it right? There's 3 sections. It'll
For
be,
current pending other support.
that's right, funding, the research resources will map to in-kind contribution, and the employment data will all pre-populate for researchers from their ORCID record.
Yes, I've been working on the BioSketch for most
Sure.
recently. So is employment part of current pending other support?
Professional preparation,
So-
which includes the education and training. What you move from document to document. So which document are you talking about, current and pending other? Because you said there's 3 sections of CPOS.
That's right. So I'm just looking at the chat and people are asking, and they're correct, that currently ORCID is not connected to the current and pending other support form,
Right.
but hopefully soon.
Yes.
And when it is connected, I think we've talked about 3 different fields. Funding, it's in an ORCID record, will pre-populate the current pending other support form. The in-kind contribution, there's parts of an ORCID record that can populate that. And the employment data, the
Well,
primary.
the employment data is in the biographical sketch. It's not in current and pending other support. That's why I asked the question. It's
Right,
2
that's what
different.
threw me too.
Yeah.
I thought primary employer was in the new common current pending other support form. All right.
Well, don't get down to individual. You were talking about categories of data, so I don't want to confuse people here.
Okay.
And Mary Sladek has asked a couple of times, so I want to make sure she gets her answer.
Yeah, that was going to be next up.
Yeah, you don't have to use research.gov to use SciENcv.
And
So that gets you your answer, Mary.
And I know a question that came up in the federal updates yesterday is there anything you can tell us about other agencies adopting SciENcv that you can say in a session that is being recorded?
We're open to working with other agencies. We've had talks with other agencies, and as soon as we have agreements in place, you're going to hear about it. So
Great, thank you.
It's amazing how the Common Form and NSF's movement and NIH's movement is encouraging other agencies to at least consider SciENcv. So we consider that very positive in and of itself.
Yep,
I agree. And all the folks here with your feedback to the help desk and your questions and identification of bugs helps actually move that along. Yeah. Let's see. So there was another question from yesterday I don't think we've addressed yet today. Is there any update to the issue in SciENcv where PIs couldn't refresh publications from ORCID? Did we already address that?
yeah, that's the case I was talking about. It affected a limited number of ORCID users, and it turned out there was some data coming from ORCID where there was an optional field for a product like journal name, and our system was expecting a journal name, and so it was throwing an error. So it wasn't everyone. It was just if you had a particular type of record that was missing something that SciENcv was expecting, and we've cleared that up, and we've followed up with everyone that it affected.
Great.
So they should all be in the clear now.
Great, thanks.
That update's gone out. So if any other issue, get on us about it.
And there's a question that, it says in the chat that says, can you clarify the NIH movement to SciENcv for current and pending / other support? If there's additional context needed, let us know. As I'm not sure.
I'm going to guess that you're wondering what NIH's plans are for that. And that is my other colleague, Michelle Bowles, who's not here, but she would be the one to address that.
And so we have about 10 minutes left in the session. So please, if you have more questions that haven't been answered, or if I missed your question in the chat and you're willing to repeat it, please do. Because I keep going through here and I feel like we've answered everything, but I also might be a little bit chat blind. So yeah, let us know.
It's hard to do, Lori. There's a lot of them in here.
There are a lot of them in here, and it's like sometimes webinars are better because you can kind of parse out the questions a little bit from the Q&A instead of the chat. But yeah, 3 years in and we're all still figuring out how to use Zoom. So yeah.
Lori, maybe if you don't mind, if I maybe talk a little bit about some of the experiences that we've heard from funders about the data that they get from researchers, especially in the employment field.
Sure.
Gosh, it would just be ideal if the employers, the universities could write the employment data that's appropriate to the ORCID records of their researchers, because we're hearing a lot from funders that researchers really identify as locally at their university as possible. So most of the time they'll identify their employer as their lab or their department and not the central university. And the data is difficult for the funders to clean up at the application stage, which really slows down the application. And then sometimes it's not quite correct. And sometimes the universities had a name change, like William and Mary changed to an ampersand from the word and all that has to be changed and updated. So again, if the universities can write the correct employment data, names and dates, departments and faculty to the ORCID record, that'll just pre-populate and your researchers will reuse that. And it's not just for the SciENcv or the funders, that'll also be used with the publishers as well. And so they publish with the correct university's name, which is really important, especially when your university is interested in the rankings. So ORCID, we're in the middle. We're just that technical infrastructure in between all the different systems. And so when you can write the authoritative data to the ORCID record, it really helps the researchers, which in turn helps your university succeed as well. And then just one last thing, ORCID, we've just started what we're calling trust markers. So when your university writes that data to the ORCID record, like the employment data, we'll also put this validated green check mark beside that. So when somebody, say at a publisher or a funder, looks at the ORCID record of your researcher, they'll see a green check mark. And so they'll know that this person claims to be hired by this university and the university has verified and validated that, which helps them. This is actually a request that came from the publishers, and we're working with the funders right now on this too. So that's a little bit of a plug. So hopefully we can get this data, more accurate and flowing easier and better for everybody. And then that way, everybody at the NSF and all the funders can improve your researchers' brilliant ideas with more money sooner.
Great, thanks, Shauna. And I'll add before we close, and please continue to ask questions in the chat if you've got any remaining ones. This universe that's tied together with things like publications, data sets, data management and sharing, and federal public access policies that are coming on for us. Understanding this universe is critically important. Understanding how your researchers use ORCID and how the record reflects not just their grants, but also their publications and data sets, and how their grants are tied to those outcomes is really important for data management and sharing, public access policies, but also research security. So these worlds may not seem to be related, but they definitely are. So the work you're doing to understand it and get it right for SciENcv is going to help in a lot of other ways. Are there any more questions? We've got a few minutes left. And if not, I will thank Carol and Bart and Sherry and Jean for being here and sharing the updates and answering all of your questions. The slides and recording will be posted on the FDP site. And if you have any questions that you think of after the session, please feel free to email me and I'll pass them along.
Yep, and Lori, you got the slides, so.
Yes, got the slides, so we're all good.
Thanks, everyone. Great session. Have a great day.
Great, thank you for coming.
Bye.
Bye-bye.